So, Michael, I wanted to share something with the congregation because you had told me that you wanted to give your testimony. And I thought that was a great idea because what's happened in your life, I think, says a lot about Grace Church and about what Grace Church is about, the mission, the way the church family welcomes people. And I think a lot of times the church doesn't realize, they don't see the impact they're having, right? Because they don't see what's going on in the rest of someone's life. They don't see what's going on with someone's family. They don't know where their family came from. They don't know what's going on with them professionally. They just see them in a Bible study or at worship or, at a service project. So I want to go back in time to a conversation that you and I had here in my backyard on Lake Colony Lane. It wasn't the first time we had met because you had done some security at the church and had come to the church for a little bit. And then my memory was just kind of disappeared. But then suddenly, out of the blue one night, you called me. And I had company over. But the Holy Spirit told me to answer the phone. And I was wondering if you would just remind me, tell about that night. Like, what's your whole memory of that night?
So it had been about 3 years, maybe, since we had spoke. They had flown by. It was after a divorce that, I was just kind of doing my own thing, trying to survive on my own, without any fellowship or anything.
No church, family.
Community. The faith that I carried with me was pretty much just my own interpretation of, me picking up the Bible here and there, like most of us sometimes do, we wait till we really need it. And then I was really in need of it at that time, more than just word.
I needed family and a friend. Some choices I had made, trying to do things on my own. They don't always go as planned. They don't always work out. And, what they're trying to do for the good. So without brotherhood and fellowship like I now have in Grace, I just felt like I was just a wandering soul. And most importantly, out of all of it, I wanted to be a leader and comfort in my children's lives.
Which is why I had, when I met back up with you that night, it was because I had no money. I needed help. I had no money. I had no house to live in. I couldn't afford rent from taking the pay cut that I took from leaving the police department, which was a radical move, making the career change and all. But it was with a lot of prayer. And in what I call that big prayer, leading up to that point, I had asked for God to put godly men into my life so that I could have counsel and leadership and a good example of what it is to live through Christ. And I had no idea how I was going to find that. And I struggled for about 1.5 years on my own after leaving, my discounted courtesy apartment, as I was leaving out of the police department. And there was a lot of change at one time, but I needed it. My kids needed it. And it led to the point where I was living with someone to to try to save money for a while, and it didn't work out after a few months. It was very toxic. And I had to up and make a decision because of the way that things were going in that environment to not go back even that day. And I was zeroed out. Literally. I had no money in my pocket, no charge on my phone, no gas in my car, and
No place to live.
only my work clothes that I had went up
No clothes.
to work in that day. And
Where'd you go?
I tried contacting a couple of friends, hey, I'm having a bad time right now. Can I come and, park it for a second, bounce a couple of things off of you? I need to stop somewhere for a second. I'm having it was rough. It was a really rough time. And that day, it's just, I don't know. I had no clue what I was going to do. And I went and basically had a mental crash in the parking lot of the church. Because even as a police officer, after serving time with you on Sundays and watching over the people at the church, I could see every day the love that everybody shows each other in the family atmosphere. And when I was going through that time years ago, divorce and police department and so on, the closer the more people asked, about church and so on, I felt, we've talked, you preached about this before too. Sometimes you get so close, you start to realize how far away from God that you are. And I realized that, and I was balancing a lot of extra jobs, and that job was one of the first ones that I stepped out of. Not on purpose, I just couldn't. I could hardly keep time with things anymore, and I would get so emotional there on duty at the church, wishing that I could be doing something else other than working, and wishing that I could be there, following through with, being involved with fellowship and all. I had no clue how to do it. Never did I know that years later I would get to the point where I would find myself at the door of that church asking for the help that I was asking and then receive what it is that I've received since then. And I feel like if you were to look at a timeline, God's been there throughout this whole time, just making the moves that He has. And I've learned that there's nothing that we can do, to keep us from God's grace and what God has, and what God has planned for us.
Even when we go the wrong way, God
That's right.
keeps intervening.
And I've never experienced the level of grace and witnessed what God can do through men until you and these, I want to call them disciples that you've grown in this church, have done for me since I've been here.
And you're one of those disciples now.
And ever since, I just admire that as a man myself. When I see these things, I've told the guys lots of times, I just hope that I can be this to somebody one day. And I want to be used, as a light for Christ. I'm not perfect. I'm not, I'm a sinner. But, we all are. So.
What if grace hadn't been there for you that night? The church.
Honestly, this sounds bad, and I never thought that I would be to a point with all my hard work, and I've tried to make good decisions, though I've made bad ones too. Had you not connected, had I not been able to connect with you, I was probably going to sleep in my car until I got paid the next week and could figure something out. And I don't know if people at the church know this, but
But what you were able to do for me when, and you kept reminding me, that it's not you doing it. Until you were able to help me find an apartment. You helped me into a hotel. And I finally, for the first time in a long time, had a good night's rest.
Felt safe.
I felt safe. I felt, you just kept reminding me, it's going to be okay. And I just kept throwing all the problems I was having at you, but what about this and what about that? And I can't remember half of them now. And
I just want to mention, I know you know this, but it's important to mention that, the church has a Good Samaritan fund that people give to. And it's usually on Communion Sundays. You've heard me talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think they always visualize what that goes to. Like, I don't think they always know, is that making a difference? Does it do anything? And, that's where that money to help you with housing, help you with transportation, to help you get clothes, was all the giving of the church members to the Good Samaritan Fund. And so I just want to remind you that it wasn't Wade Griffith's money, but it was money entrusted to me by the church. And now you have what? What all do you have going for you now?
So with that big prayer, I'd prayed to put me, another thing is to give me a normal life again, outside of the police department, because that was a wreck for me. And then, so I have a good most importantly, I have a good steady schedule with my kids. I'm in a safe environment now versus what I was dealing with as a police officer. And, I've been in an apartment in Leeds now for about 2 years, and it's peaceful, it's affordable. I wouldn't have seen myself there.
Good landlord.
I didn't know, and I now have I wanted to get back into painting and automotive painting particularly. I have a skill set that I've tried to build on for a long time, even before I was a police officer, that, I didn't know I would be able to step back in and do what I've been able to do. And I think that's another thing, too, that my coworkers really don't understand. I prayed for that. And, when they see me work the way that I do and my ethic, it's not me. I mean,
because after the police department, you were in a very toxic work environment,
right,
in that industry that was very, 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 very unhealthy. I mean, I know the details of it, about how horrible they were to you. And you and I had a lot of conversations about that.
Right.
You remember?
Yeah.
Late at night.
Oh, yeah.
And
because I would have these moments where I'm thinking, man, gosh, all this hard work and, this interaction and that interaction with the person in
being
leadership,
cursed out, yelled at,
it just would make
threatened.
it feel like, oh man, well, now it's back to square, whatever.
And I kept saying, and I got to confess something to you, I kept saying God is going to put you in the right place.
Uh-huh.
And you were applying to jobs everywhere, but I told you that
almost 2 years.
Yeah, I told you that for 2 years. And there came a point where I was like, okay, God, like I'm really,
because I began to wonder too.
I've oversold you. Did I oversell you, God? I'm ashamed to say that because it's not. Entering into that, I definitely was like, well, God's going to take care of this. God's going to take care of this. And then it's going to be God's timing. But, as the time went on and it got worse and worse where you were, I started doubting a little bit. And
well, I think that was probably the devil in both of our heads.
But about that moment, kaboom.
Yeah.
This guy wants to open a Mako body shop. They want you to be the head painter, which is your dream job. He's the good boss. It's no one's mean to you, or
without hesitation, gave me, time off this morning to come.
Yeah, I gave you time off to give because you told him you were going to do what?
Give my testimony.
Give your testimony. And so blessings on him too. I think it's important for people to know a little bit how you got, what led to your circumstances. I mean, just can you say a little bit about your childhood?
Well, I'm one of 4 boys, the Richards boys. I'm the second oldest. There's Chris, me, David, and Carl, and we're all kind of spread out now. David's in Texas, and Chris is in Chicago, and Carl is here in Alabama. And we were born in Memphis and grew up in West Memphis. And my father has passed, but I probably should have a better way now as a 35-year-old to say this, but he pretty much, I feel, worked himself into the grave to try to take care of us.
And I feel like that's where I derive a lot of my work ethic from, because he would do whatever he had to do. And that wasn't easy off of a diesel mechanic's wage to do that. And
so he particularly raised us. There were times where that got tough on him, and he and my mom both too come from kind of a rough,
I don't know, she might see this one day, and because we don't have a relationship, because we didn't really have frequent exposure with her, growing up.
Why?
I don't really know what happened, but it was when I was about 5 that I don't want to say that she left or he left. I don't know who did what, but so she was a dancer and my dad was a bouncer at a joint called Danny's that was big time in Memphis back then in the early 80s. So that's how the Richards boys came about. And I guess at one point they married, and there come us 4 boys. Well, as time's gone on, as time went on, as I got older, we might have heard a little bit about this that happened or a little bit about that happened. And for me, I've always just kind of wanted to, no matter what, protect the image that I have of my dad, no matter what anybody says. And speaking of my mother and father, there's no telling where I would be today. There's yesterday and there's today. Yesterday, no matter how long ago that was, if people like my family then were to have experienced and been able to have somebody grab their hand and pull them up like Grace has done me, could you imagine the different kind of life that me and my brothers possibly could have went through? So if something like this can grow in someone and reach someone else and reach another and reach another, that's why I would want to give my testimony to all this. And I know I'm kind of going in circles because there are a lot of big checkpoints, in my story. And I try not to have a sob story.
You don't?
I mean, I try not to be sobby about it. But I actually, I think it gives me a lot of grit. I think it gives me a lot of courage. It's built a lot in me, the things that I've experienced, both as a child and as an adult. I'm stubborn as hell, so it took a while to realize that I couldn't do things on my own. I had to try again and try again. And
you needed God and you needed
family, not just blood.
You've had a lot of people in the church pour into you, other than me, right? It's guidance and small group leaders and
One of them I feel like I can call a good friend, and I look to him almost as almost the same as you. You know, you guys are almost like my fatherly figures that I can go to now. I met Chip Malloy through you, and though you're about to move to Colorado, you know, this is a relationship he and I have now, but also can never go away no matter how far you guys are. Even after, you know, I met back up with you and I was welcomed into the church, and I now began, you know, every Sunday coming. So I was still having financial issues, and Chip's been there long to help, you know, coach me through some things and give me a lot of advice, not just, you know, as a man, but professionally too. You know, I wouldn't have my side landscaping business today if it wasn't for him, you know, believing in me too, and helping. It's just, it feels so good now to know that I have people that are always going to be there, you know, for me like that.
you are. So the person listening to this, you know, they could be thinking, wow, that's great, the church did this, and I'm sure they are, and I want them to see the difference that the church is making. I want them to see lives are being changed, disciples are being made, families are being strengthened. You're the living, breathing proof of it. But what do they need to do? I mean, what does your story suggest to them that they should do in their faith to make this type of thing continue to happen?
You know, just show up and things will just start happening. And it's not to receive, you know. I kept telling you, you know, hey, you know, I'm good. Save that stuff for people that, you know, there's other people that need it more than me. And y'all kept telling me, no, because you say things like that is why you deserve it.
How can they reach another Michael Richards?
Good question. How can they start?
Yeah. What should be, when they're going to work or they're out in the community or they're in their neighborhood, you know, how can they individually be used by God to reach another person like you?
You know, it's been a while since we've had our Sunday night meetings that I was able to go to, the men's group. But I wouldn't have even had a clue how to, you know, and if some of that was fresh on my mind, you know, because that stuff is gold on Sundays going into the work week, for an example, using an environment like that, for an example. But it starts with being ready, I guess. You know, I'm not always ready to pray over someone or offer up something out of my pocket to somebody, you know. But when you say the Methodist Church is, I think of it as a methodical approach to, you know, the method in that, to me, I think is about the methodical approach to brotherhood and
it takes time.
serving.
It's a journey. I mean, how long have we been?
So when you approach things with a method, you know, for me, just showing up to Grace and witnessing what these men and women are doing amongst each other is one of the things that starts to fill my cup.
So we need to bring more people.
That's right.
Find someone who doesn't have that.
Right.
Like your dad didn't have it, your mom didn't have it.
Right.
And get them there so that they can find a family.
That's right. Because you have to see it. You know, if it wouldn't have been for me taking that job as a police officer, I don't know if I would have ever found Grace. Because I would have never, you know, just because of the demographics and the area. I mean, I wouldn't have thought that, from what I come from,
You wouldn't have
growing
thought this
up.
church would.
I would have thought that, it's
Say it.
probably that, not that I wouldn't have been welcome, but I probably would not have fit in.
I think you fit in better than anybody.
And whether it's you as the pastor or anyone else at Grace can do it too. But I felt comfortable coming into it as you almost treated it like this guy's with me. And that's how I thought of it. That as long as I'm with Wade, and maybe throughout time these guys will get to hear a little bit about me, learn a little bit about me, and hopefully see me grow
So that somebody can bring somebody with them
within them. Yeah.
and be like, "You're with me."
Right.
Yeah.
So I managed to pull a work friend in there before. He's now off in the military, but and I've tried others.
You're doing it. Put it out there and let God do the rest, right?
Right.
I love you, man.
I love you too.
You're my brother. Forever. Right?
Forever.
Amen.
I'm gonna come to Colorado.
Amen. Let's do it.